Hey guys, what's up? So, we got some new information today about Elden Ring, specifically around invasions. I know there was apparently 16 minutes of footage that a select few have been invited to see, yours truly, of course, not among them. I think it'll be interesting to see if that footage is released more generally. I expect it will be. But what was most interesting to me, some news coming out of an interview, and it has to do with the invasion mechanic. And it turns out that solo hosts will not be able to be invaded. At least that's the current plan. From clearly has another 4 or 5 months to change their minds about this as the game shapes up, as they shave off the rough corners. I'm sure they'll be experimenting with a number of different approaches, but quite frankly, leaving solo hosts out of the invasion mix is probably the right move and really is the logical culmination of a direction that From chose some time ago. Now, at this point, we don't have a whole lot of information. A statement like solo hosts cannot be invaded, that may not be true 100% of the time. Frankly, I would be really surprised if there isn't an item like the dried fingers that might allow you to summon another phantom, might open your world up to invasions. There's a lot of interesting things they could do with the mechanic. The whole idea of invasions being tied to co-op is something that really From's been building to for some time. So another variation on that could be some sort of other power that the game gives you, but in exchange for that, you open yourself up to invasion. Similar to the way that the Ember works in Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 Ember lets you summon, gives you a lot more health, but the trade-off is that you get to get invaded. As a solo player, I'm sure they could come up with all kinds of approaches that would allow a solo player who chooses to be invaded to be invaded. When it comes to co-op though, I think this is great news. Revion actually had a tweet about this. I'll link to it in the description. I could not agree more with him. I think he's 100% correct. This is the direction that From has been heading. In the early days, Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, you can see invasions where you can call them effectively random, and then there was a cooldown period, and then you'd be eligible again. And I know from even playing the remaster, if you're in a hot zone, you can actually get invaded quite frequently. And there was overlap too between like being invaded by blue spirits versus reds, where you could get invaded by one and then immediately thereafter be invaded by the other. So I think giving co-op priority is the right way to go. If you look at Bloodborne, this is really where this started for me. This is when they started more carefully cultivating who can be invaded and in what circumstances. In Bloodborne, obviously, a solo player could not be invaded at all outside of 2 of the nightmare areas. And then when you co-opt, you would summon in a bell ringer into your world who could summon in invaders. But then you had the option to kill the bell ringer, and then you wouldn't get invaded at all anymore. And then if you go to Dark Souls 3, as a solo player, you could get invaded with relatively low priority or probability. Obviously, the greater priority was placed on hosts who had multiple phantoms in the world. More phantoms meant more chances for invasion. I think this is really great because I think invasions can be a turnoff for new players, especially those who are just starting out. And I think twinking contributes to that a lot. I think getting rid of the twinking problem solves a lot of that, but I can see how this would be disheartening for new players. Of course, new players that choose to summon right out of the gate are probably going to have to deal with the problem as they've dealt with it today. They're going to probably be invaded right away. I could see Elden Ring giving them a free pass for the first level or two, even with co-op, maybe. We'll have to see how that shakes out. But I think tying the mechanic super directly to co-op really helps send a positive signal. Even though those of us in the know with Dark Souls 3 understand that it's already tied to co-op to a great extent today, the average player doesn't really understand that. They know they've played the game solo, they've been invaded, they don't necessarily have the same visibility into the extent to which the multiple host or the hosts with multiple phantoms, their worlds are prioritized for invasion. I think making it super clear and sending a message to the player base that this is a trade-off. If you choose to summon, you are opening your world up for invasion. You can play the game by yourself. You won't be invaded. And let's face it, when you summon in these games, you make these games super easy. You remove any semblance of challenge from these games whatsoever, which not a bad thing per se if that's what you want to do. And I personally enjoy playing these games both ways. I enjoy usually playing them solo first. I can explore at my own pace. I can figure things out for myself. But then I also enjoy kind of like a chill hangout session with my friends and playing through the game. For those that want to summon though to beat the game, it's really rewarding for me as an invader to know that I'm only going to invade those people that are effectively trying to put the game into super easy mode. That to me is a way more satisfying experience than to invade some poor solo host who's actually trying to rise to the challenge of these games by themselves, but maybe they're not very well equipped to dealing with me. I don't really like invading them. I'd much rather invade into groups of players, and anybody invading at this point in Dark Souls 3, I have to think, feels the same way. You know, it's funny, I think actually the biggest downside, to the extent that there is a downside of this policy, is going to be for players like us. If you're watching this video, presumably you like invading, you like the PvP in this game. The downside for us is not so much on the invasion side, but on the being invaded side. I imagine most of you, like me, will want to play this game solo, at least at first, and probably want to experience invasions during your playthroughs. And even if maybe you might prefer to avoid them in your first or second playthrough, by the time you're building your 30th, your 40th character, you need something to spice up these playthroughs. It would be nice to be able to be invaded. I really suspect, again, there will be something that enables solo hosts to be invaded. Stray Curtis, actually in response to Revian's tweet, mentioned something like goodbye bonfire duelists. Unfortunately, I think that's probably not going to be the case. I expect those players will be able to be invaded if that's what they want. I don't see that going away, which, you know, is cool. And it's also kind of interesting because one of the things that I've always wanted is some sort of world indicator when the world is dried finger, because that tells you a lot. It tells you a lot about the motivations of the person you're invading. When you invade a solo player, if they're dried fingered, you know that they want you there, and that gives you some really useful information. Well, even if they don't give you a world indicator in Elden Ring, if solo players can't normally be invaded and you invade a solo player, well, guess what? You know right away what they're about. You know that they're probably a bonfire duelist, and then you can act accordingly. So curious to see how this shakes out. I'm curious to see as more information comes out, but I think overall, this is a change that I want to embrace. I think it's going to make the game better. I think it's going to make it easier for us to find ganks. It's going to make it a lot more fun, a lot more challenging. So we'll have to see how this goes. The one thing that's open too is how many invaders can be in a world at once. Some people have pointed to the 4-player world as an indication that there can be at most 2 phantoms and 1 invader. We'll have to see. I've heard some people suggest that Dark Souls 3 was built in the same fashion, but what they meant was 4 players on the home team, not 4 players total. I would be really surprised if the game is actually capped at 4. I expect we'll see another covenant like Way of Blue. I expect we'll see invasion covenants, especially those where you can invade with more than 1 invader at a time. So I expect that the actual world cap will be much larger than 4. But again, we'll have to wait and see. It's interesting to see all this information shake out. So stay tuned. I'm pumped for Elden Ring. And actually I have some more DS3 videos coming, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching, guys.